Hello there everybody, and welcome to my basic guide for Reavers. In this video I'm going to go over all the unique things about these guys, explain how their unit roster works, and generally I want to give you a feeling about why these are one of the most powerful early game factions in the game and also a terrible lot of fun to play with. So, first things first, let's talk about the basic identity of the Reaver faction before we go over any other trait. The Reavers excel at warfare due to primarily two reasons. The first one is total war. It's pretty simple and easy explained. We don't suffer any Imperial penalties when we declare war without justifications. That means war with no consequences. Basically, you can decide to bust somebody's skull whenever you want to. The only danger with that is that everybody else will hate you so much that they all will wage war against you. But besides that, no negative repercussions. That is outright amazing, because that means you decide when you want to smack somebody without suffering too much for it. The other thing is focused aggression. Reavers have a unique interaction with the marked status. Normally, marking only lowers the enemy's evasion, which is only interesting for ranged units. For the Reavers, everything else is different. They gain 10% damage extra on top of the evasion debuff. That means ranged attackers can buff their damage for up to 50% while hitting their target up to 50% easier. But it doesn't stop there, because that bonus is also applied on melee units. That means marking can result in 50% more damage for all of your units. And that is why you are so incredibly busted, because you are really good at pushing out damage out of all your lines. Your ranged attackers will miss not too often and dish out heavy damage, and your other units enjoy the extra free damage as well. There are downsides, of course. We have one Whispering Stone less because, we are scary people. Therefore, we don't have the right to interact with free cities right from the get-go without any tricks. And last but not least, we have a unique resource called war spoils. We only earn war spoils from waging war against independent cities or AI empires. We can invest war spoils into units, mage-lock cannons, and we also can use these to interact with AI cities. If they aren't vassalized yet, you can use war spoils to increase the standing with them by just intimidating, or you can use war spoils to get yourself the trade goods off of that city. In either way, this stuff is really good for your faction. There's also a fourth way of spending them, by using your overseers to subdue units and recruit them afterwards. All of these things I'm going to talk about a little bit more in this video, of course. That sums it up, and that leaves the Reavers with an insanely powerful offensive potential. We can increase our damage, we can wage war whenever we want to whoever we want to, and we also gain even a unique resource out of that, allowing us to recruit powerful units and or interact with the free cities. That is really crazy, and that's our baseline. Now, spells for this culture. We start out with Suppressing Barrage. This one is a very underwhelming spell at the first glance, but you would be mistaken. It has two main things. First up, it has a low chance to immobilize. This is extremely powerful because we can basically subdue, that means recruit and take out of combat everything which has been immobilized in either way. So we have already a super powerful synergy with that line alone. And what's the second thing, which is not depicted in the description, which is an outright shame, and I hope Paradox will fix that at some point, or as it should say, Triumph. This thing destroys terrain cover. So if the enemy stands in foliage or other stuff, push a Suppressing Barrage on them and all the cover is gone. Thanks to the comment section, I have discovered that wisdom, and I meant to share. It's the hidden effect of that spell, and it should be in the description box, because this way you can prepare your ranged attacks even better and deny the enemy the cover where he thinks he's safe in. Powerful spell. Very versatile due to that. And Designate Target, well, it does what the name says. You apply 2 stacks of marking. Mind you, these cannot be resisted. This is really an important point, and it distracts the enemy, which makes all attacks flanking attacks. So the Reavers are very synergistic with the flanking racial trait that you can pick for extra hard flanking attacks. The other thing that we can do, but it's not really anything you wouldn't have expected if you played the game a while, engraving a focus allows us to apply the focused aggression on every foreign unit, which means whatever you summon, whatever you recruit, all these guys will have the engraving of focus ability, which is our spell and baseline roster. So, no, baseline skills. Let's talk about the roster. So, you start out with really powerful tier 1 units. I want to start, nevertheless, with the scout, because then we go over into military exclusively. The observers are very interesting scout units, as they have no attack skill, but they can mark on an obscenely high range, making them an interesting choice to put into your early game stacks, because they act as damage amplifiers, which can stay so darned far away from the action that you don't have too much of a risk of losing them. Apart from that, they have an extra high sensing range, which is pretty cool, because, you know, that is useful to have. It's pretty unique for them. And apart from that, yeah, well, they're just mechanical units. Nothing more to say about that. But they have their uses, unique uses, especially due to the marking attack. Moving on over to the tier 1 units. The mercenary is your spearman of choice. He has a pretty hard hit, and he has the drive back skill, which is pushing themselves into the hex where they are attacking and moving the target away, which is really good because it frees up your backliners to shoot, and it doesn't provoke a revenge attack. That's really good. You can just smack for one action point for a pretty substantial amount of damage. It also pierces, so it's always effective, regardless of the enemy's defense. Apart from that, it's sad to say that these guys are mercenaries, and therefore they are more costly than your average tier 1 unit, being a pretty nasty substantial downside to these, because you can't spam them as easily as you would be able to do with other tier 1 units. And they also scale pretty bad into the later stages of the game due to being too costly. But they are really good in the early game. I really, really can recommend them early on. Harriers are your starting skirmisher units, which can throw a net every second round, which inflicts immobilization and marking. This is just, yeah, it's amazing. You can control the combat with that and inflict a substantial amount of damage. On top of that, of course, they are hard-hitting, as all skirmishes are, featuring not too many other unique sales points, but that net is really, really powerful because of the Overseer's Subdue ability, which I have already talked about. Let's move on to the tier 2s and talk about the Overseer. The Overseer's basic attack is already amazing in itself. It has a chance to blind the enemy, which will cancel retaliation attacks, so you get to hit without retaliation, and it also lowers the accuracy on ranged attackers, making this guy a powerful disabler and a powerful enabler for your own units by just whacking enemies. But we don't stop here. Subdue is a really cool thing. You can simply immobilize the enemy and let them not act for the remainder of the fight as soon as you put that on them. They need to be immobilized, frozen, or stunned, and currently, I don't know if that already got fixed, it only applies if the immobilization has applied freshly in that turn, but I don't know. There has been some talk about that, but I think this glitch will be fixed quickly. It cannot be done on heroes, obviously, and most importantly, you have to keep your Overseer safe after that. But it takes out an enemy unit entirely out of the combat without any time limits. I don't think that this will stay like that, so don't be too surprised if it suddenly lasts only 2-3 turns anymore. But currently, it's busted as hell. And we get to patch up allies. It's a touch burst heal, which comes with all its benefits and downsides. Burst heals are nice, they can get your allies from the brink of death, but touch heal means you need to get your Overseers up close to the front as well, which sucks a bit. it also has a pretty heavy cooldown. These guys are more on the offensive side than on the defensive side, but the burst heal is really, really good. And then they are our Mage Locks. Mage Locks hit hard and heavy. They need all their 3 actions to fire, but that shot is piercing, it has 36 damage baseline, and it hits like a truck therefore. They also get to take aim, and this is where they really are useful in all points. That means they can mark. They can every turn mark, which is amazing. So they can either shoot or buff the damage for the rest of the team. I underestimated how versatile these guys are, but their damage profile isn't as high as other archers' damage profile is, because even if these shots hit like a truck, they require preparation, and they can only fire once per turn, and yeah, they aren't as agile and versatile as other archers, but they are amazing and should not be excluded in any of your builds. Alone due to the take aim skill, they can dish out or increase the damage for all of your units, which is really, really useful, more than you might think. Moving over now to the tier 3 units. We have 2 of them actually, in form of the Dragoon being our tier 3 skirmisher, giving us 2 skirmisher units in the roster, making us very agile on the battlefield. They hit hard, and they can shoot to distract enemies every second turn, and they also have a piercing shot on that. This is again a nice flanking gadget, and that's why I said flanking extra damage is very, very powerful on this faction. It's another reason for that. Another cool thing about these guys is they are master skirmishers, and therefore they can attack and retreat afterwards, which is really, really brutal. That also works on the pistol shot, so they can move up, shoot, and right away again. They are also compatible with all forms of mount traits, therefore really, really brutally versatile unit, with its only downside being squishy as hell. As a tier 3 unit, that is really, really low amount of defense, resistance, and HP, so they explode quite quickly. And last but not least, the Mage Cannon. So, Mage Lock Cannon, I'm sorry. It is only buyable with War Spoils, so it's exclusive for that, which comes with its own ups and downs. It means you don't need gold to build them, which is really good in many situations, but it also means that you can only build them with War Spoils, which can be sometimes really bad because you want to spend that stuff otherwise. They can fire a line shot, which always hits, and demolishes obstacles. This is insane. Alone these things, but on top of that, we also cancel out enemies' defense and retaliation, so these guys are the perfect initiators for your attack. Mark, fire cannon, all in, and this is how you can bust down enemies like crazy. They are also putting up fortification damage. I mean, it would be really silly if they wouldn't, as the cannons they are, and that rounds up your roster. So, we're entering now the strategy part of the video, and as the first thing, as a summary of our unit roster here, I want to point out your baseline roster is squishy as hell. You might be able to dish out tremendous amounts of damage right from the get-go, but your units explode extremely quickly. You should know that weakness as early as possible. This means you need to hit hard, take control of the fight quickly, and then it's easy pickings after that. To mitigate these problems, you can use tomes that increase the resilience out of the enchantment area, the Materium area. You are very synergistic with that. And your Overseer's Subdue ability allows you to recruit whatever you want. So ideally, find some frontliners, either by abducting them from the enemy or filling up your ranks with tomes. But you really need to fill up something in between, because your only line of defense in this entire roster are these mercenaries. And they aren't... No, they're just not kicking it. And this is maybe the biggest weakness and maybe one of the biggest difficulties to master. But due to the fact that you can immobilize and subdue, you can burst real hard. Now, at the beginning of the game, I always run out with my watchers and scout out the area and try to found a second city. Ankaras was founded in turn 6 or 7 and has grown to this size. I strongly recommend to found a city as quick as possible. You have a standard baseline affinity to materium, allowing you to always go for military engineering, which makes outposts much more powerful. And with some extra splicing into nature, you can really found cities darn quickly, making you also very nicely expansionistic. Your Materium focus also allows you always to go into Arcane Artisans sooner or later, which upgrades your mines massively. After that, it all depends on your playstyle. The Chaos Affinity you always start with leads to benefits out of killing stuff, which is fairly synergistic with your War Spoil tactic anyways. After conquer or founding a second city, you should totally try to get yourself into some war, being it either for a free city or a local AI that thinks it can settle down too close to your borders. You should always try to wage war with somebody where you can control it though. Therefore, to wage war, your early game will consist out of squeezing out as many units as possibly can be while maintaining your city growth. It's imperative that you don't stop letting your cities grow. Your city unique buildings crank out production and mana, and your unique special province improvement that comes from your faction is worth mentioning as well. The Reaver Manufactorum is providing gold and draft. This is really powerful. Don't sleep on that. It's a free mine where you want it, and gold income is really good for your faction anyways, and it also provides draft out of pretty much any other production province in the vicinity. This means you can crank out your units even faster without having to take the detour on building something nasty like a blacksmith or anything else which is just costier than you want to. Since your build doesn't include any, or your baseline build of the Reavers doesn't include any income boosters to knowledge and food, you really should always focus the knowledge income as hard as possible, because this game is a literal arms race when it comes down to the tomes. The faster you have your tomes, be them whatever you build you play, the faster you get more firing power. Therefore, this culture really needs your hard work. Build libraries, build research provinces, crank out the special province improvements out of your tomes for knowledge. It's really important that you focus that topic. Otherwise, you might fall back, because for the Reavers it's imperative to be always dominant. The moment you fall back, it might be already the point where the game is on a downward spiral, because like I said, you are extremely you are extremely vulnerable to burst style attacks, and being overrun is also just another type of bursting, so you always need to have a big army, and therefore it's important to stress out a strong economy. Your food issues can be resolved either by focusing into the correct provinces, tomes, or whatever might tickle your itch. But I made the experience that I was okay with medium-sized cities most of the time, not stressing out too much my city growth, but instead going for higher levels of happiness via city stability buildings. This makes your cities competitive as well, and there's plenty of tomes that increase the city's income due to high stability, and this is a really nice workaround to keep your production numbers high, even if your population numbers are quite low. That's at least what worked for me in brutal difficulty in manifold builds. And that pretty much summarizes what I wanted to say about this part. A few words about combat and army building now at the end. So, your rosters, like I said, are extremely vulnerable. You don't need to worry about losing units too much in the tier 1 roster. They should be replaced anyways at some point. The Harriers are really nice and synergistic for your Overseers. Immobilize Subdue is a hell of a strong combo, but I strongly recommend, if you want to play much on that Subdue route, to get yourself some other source of immobilization, like for example here the White Witch, or whatever tickles your fancy. It's just important to note this tier 1 roster scales incredibly bad. I do like the units, but Harriers die way too fast, and Mercenaries are too costly for what they do. The drive back skill is really good early on, but it loses its appeal in the mid game damn quickly. Therefore, you need something for the front line, and you need some disposable units. Summons work for this faction amazingly well, being it tome summons or other summons in that only last combat. It's up to you. Either way, something that can just die for a turn for you to take action afterwards is extremely important for this faction, and you should always try to keep your backliners alive in your combat. Basically, the moment you start losing your mage locks, supporters, and cannons, basically the combat is already lost. Your imperative should be always imperative for you to control where your losses are happening. Otherwise, it's really easy to just spiral out of control, and that's probably where this faction is the most trickiest. I personally recommend, due to all these issues, to use the support line of your heroes a lot. And of course, signature skills, either support skills or summon skills, are working tremendously well. Also, honorable mentions go out to Restore, offering a really nice little heal, also being a status effect remover, really good stuff. And always learn mark target on your heroes. It's a free action and it cranks out more damage. The only downside is the cooldown is fairly high, so your heroes should only mark priority targets. And all the other support line skills are so good for the Reaver faction, because baseline stats are always good for a squishy team, and precision training is extremely good due to our high knack towards ranged attacks. I mean, we have, after all, 5 ranged attackers in our roster. Basically, only our spear guys cannot shoot, so precision training is really worth the deal on this build. And last but not least, Spur to Action. This spell is, on mage locks, for example, crazy. Getting to shoot 2 times with those hot hitters is really good. So 3 heroes, 3 spurs to action, you will see how powerful that can be. Of course, there's plenty of strategies. I'm currently experimenting with lots of other options, but I hope that this video helped you to get a bit of an understanding how these guys work, and they are insanely fun. To put a summary there, go aggressive early on, rack up as many units and armies as you can possibly afford in the early game without destroying your city economy growth. That's really important, and that's where you need to learn your way. But the Reavers can only win if they have a stupidly huge army. They don't win with quality, they win with quantity early on. They get their quality either out of tomes or out of abducting people, and that's it. I hope that helped you out. Feel free to leave me comments. Feel free to leave me your insane wise things that I don't know about. Like, for example, suppressing barrage was a common thing that I didn't know about. So feel free to enlighten me and the other people here as well, because I love it when the comments are helpful for everybody. Feel free to leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and check out the other links in the description box. I also want to thank the supporters of the channels at this point. Big thanks to all of you, and check out Patreon, PayPal, and Buy Me a Coffee. If you'd wanted to join in, that's where you should go. And I want to thank yet again everybody who's watching this video after the nasty ad roll that I have to do at the end. Thanks for being around. Have a great time. Until we meet again.